I am ready.
Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. A lot to talk about tonight. We're going to talk a lot of college football playoff, a lot of college football in general, talk about IU, Ball State, Notre Dame, all those teams that have really a lot of the Indiana schools this year had great seasons this year, so we're going to talk about their postseason opportunities. I know, B. Scott, you're not super happy about how things went for Purdue, but all things considered, the rest.
We fired Bob Diaco. That's all that matters in the end. No more Bob Diaco. No more Greg Brown. Maybe now we can actually have a defense that rushes the passer and corners and defense backs that actually turn their heads and look for a football.
Hey, I mean that would be priority one, right? So maybe that'll start to work out a little bit. But yeah, a lot of college football to get to, and honestly, B. Scott, with I've had a little bit more time to get riled up about the college football playoff. Having taken last week off instead, so I'm ready to go.
You've been very riled up about this. I mean, anything that comes out in regards towards your argument about the college football playoff, you have retweeted or shared.
Yes.
I mean, you've been very outspoken about this.
I am ready to go.
If there is not change because of what you have done, I don't think anything could ever change.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been very, and it doesn't help that the Colts lost and the Cubs are talking about trading Yu Darvish. So like my sports barometer, my sports anger is just all coming through right now and is ready to go at the college football playoff.
I mean, I even saw something you retweeted or shared a bracket for a 16-team college football playoff that included Ball State.
Yes, I mean, obviously that would be at the high end part of it. 16 teams is probably a little bit too much. 8 is like the agreed upon kind of number there. But I have one that we'll get to a little bit later. That's what they call in the biz a tease. I will get to that a little bit later. Of a system that I think would work. It'd be very exciting. I don't know if you'll go for it, B. Scott. You'll kind of be my test because you're the common sense guy on the show. I just kind of like, what if this happens? I'm the conspiracy theory weird proposition guy. So you'll kind of keep me grounded in that respect.
Well, let's hope I can do that. That's a big task.
So let's go ahead and hop right into it here. A lot to get to tonight on the podcast. First things first, let's talk about those Indiana schools that had great seasons this year. We'll start with Ball State. They win the MAC. They upset Buffalo 38-28. They led 35-21 at halftime. I'll keep it a buck with you, B. Scott. I knew that the game was on. But I kind of was lackadaisical as far as turning it on. I was just kind of like, I'll.
Are you serious?
I didn't watch the first half. I didn't watch the.
I watched the entire. Well, maybe I didn't watch the entire. I think I missed maybe like the first half of the first quarter.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, I'll turn it on. I'll get to it eventually. Is kind of the mindset I went through.
It's not surprising that you missed it because you did pick Buffalo.
Yes, I picked.
You were in that crowd of. Ball State does not have a chance.
Well, and the thing is that like I've seen this movie before, and I'm happy to be pleasantly surprised. I'll take the L on this one as far as having picked Buffalo, because we've seen this before. I've literally lived through Ball State Buffalo MAC championship. Ball State has a chance to win,
but this was a reverse script.
Oh yes.
Buffalo came in heavily favored in this one, whereas Ball State came in heavily favored in the last one.
Right. But we've seen this before as far as like Ball State having high aspirations. They go into a big game and they lose. It's like that in basketball too. Every year they go into the MAC tournament with big goals of potentially making the NCAA tournament and winning the MAC championship, and they fall apart and they don't seem to win it. So I was not. Having been through the ringer before, I was not super quick as far as getting the game turned on.
But like I said, there was something different There is just something different this year about this team.
Yeah, and they absolutely handled Buffalo. I mean, that rushing attack that Buffalo had, I mean, the defense played out of their minds. Drew Plitt had 273 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was on it. Brandon Martin had 13 tackles. Antonio Phillips, 6 tackles and an interception. It was a great game. It was a great played game on both sides. I was thinking about it earlier today before, we started the Zoom call and went live and everything. I was like, who would have thought that between, you had Nate Davis and Brady Hoke. You had Pete Lembo and Keith Winning, and then you finally get the MAC championship with Drew Plitt and Mike New.
No, you didn't just have Keith Winning. You also had an NFL wide receiver in Willie Snead.
True, yes.
And you on defense, you had at one point a starting NFL defensive end in Jonathan Newsom,
who sacked Peyton Manning, and I think strip sacked him, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm happy. I'm happy that Ball State finally gets over the hump, gets the MAC championship. I think Mike New's job is safe for now, which is good. I mean, they have a lot of talent graduating, coming up here, and so we'll see how long that kind of honeymoon phase after winning the MAC championship kind of lasts a little bit. But I think it did buy him like an extra at least a year or two, because Drew Plitt graduates this year. They lose their leading rusher, their leading receiver, and it's going to be important for them.
Are any of those guys coming back?
That's what I'm saying, is that a lot of those guys are leaving, is what I'm saying.
Well, the question is, though, have any of them decided that they may come back? Because remember, this year was a free year of eligibility.
True.
All of those guys can come back.
True. So maybe that'll be part of it, because
Caleb Huntley is not. We do know that because he opted out of the MAC championship to prepare for the NFL draft. He stated that. Yeah. So he's as of now, he's the only one that we know for certain.
True. I forgot all about that. So
finally put together a solid season without any injuries and everything like that. A lot of that team did. Maybe another year of running that back and showing people what they have when they're healthy again is going to improve stock for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
At the same time, a lot of these guys could also jump while the iron's hot and put their name into that transfer portal as well.
Yeah, and that's what I have on the sheet here, is that it's important for Ball State to keep that momentum into 2021. So yeah, if that means that they run it back with Drew Plitt and some of the talent that they would have normally lost in a normal offseason, that would be fantastic. But yeah, I mean, at its core, it was great to see, a Ball State team finally get the win, and we'll see if that actually carries over into their first bowl win in school history. Because it was really exciting to see them finally get over that hump, and I'm happy for Mike New, because at the beginning we loved the Mike New hire. And we had a solid first season at the helm, and then there was a few years where they were plagued by injuries. There was a few years where they just
I would say that has been the biggest key to the Mike New era has been injuries.
Yeah,
to be honest, I feel like his whole tenure has been plagued by injuries, and finally we got to see what he's capable of with a full healthy roster in sense. And look what happened. They won the MAC championship.
Yeah. So very happy for Ball State and them getting the win, and we'll see what they have for San Jose State.
Now that would be an awesome, put that on the redemption trail as well. If it was San Diego State that have that opportunity to, you beat Buffalo in the MAC championship game, and then you go and you get to play San Diego State in a bowl game, the team that really kind of ripped Ball State's heart out by signing Brady Hoke away prior to the MAC championship game.
Yeah, that was such a weird. That was a
departure.
That was because didn't he go? He went Ball State, San Diego State, Michigan, right?
Yeah.
What a weird kind of stepping stone, kind of in between there. But I mean, works out, I guess, for all parties there. But yeah, so I'm excited to watch the bowl game and see what they can do.
Yeah, me too. And it's on my birthday.
There you go. Dear
Happy
Ball
birthday
State,
to me.
give B. Scott the present of the first bowl win in program history,
But
please.
I
Thank you.
feel more confident going into this bowl game than I did when they lost to Buffalo in the MAC championship back in '08, mostly because momentum, and also then you just kind of looked at it and you go, man, they lost this game because Brady Hoke jumped ship, and there's none of that. So I feel like I have a lot more confidence in Ball State going into this bowl game than I've had in any other one. I mean, I guess other than the ones when Keith Winning was our quarterback.
Well, I mean, even I don't know. I'm going into it with some like hopeful optimism because like they kind of backed into their other bowl games as far as like none of them were coming off of a MAC championship, obviously. So like you have the whole Brady Hoke deal. I mean, who knows how into it Nate Davis was after the undefeated season was over. And then you have a year where they play Arkansas State, who's always kind of a sneaky good, mid-major team when they play him when Keith Winning was there. I think that might have been the only bowl trip that the Cardinals had.
We also remember we played.
Oh, yeah. Well, we played. No, we didn't play FAU. We played UCF.
Yeah, FAU.
Blake
UCF,
Bortles. Yeah. We were, and I was at that game, so I'm surprised I forgot it. But
yeah.
Blake Bortles ran all over Ball State that night. So yeah, I mean, I am cautiously optimistic because San Jose State is a very good team. I mean, they're ranked for a reason, but also Buffalo is ranked. So we'll see what happens. All right, so another team from Indiana that had a good season this year, obviously, was IU. They are headed to the Outback Bowl. They will face Ole Miss on January 2nd. And you know what? A lot of people a lot of IU fans up in arms about how, they got gypped. They should have been in the New Year's Six Bowl, whatever. And you know what? At the same time, for me, I have it written down here. They haven't won a bowl game in my lifetime. They're 0-5 since 1991. That was the year I was born. The Outback Bowl to me is still. I mean, it's not a New Year's Six Bowl. I'm sure there's some extra money and stuff and incentives to get there. But at the same time, the Outback Bowl is still. The Outback Bowl is still.
The Outback Bowl is still. They still playing on New Year's Day, don't they?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it's still
as far when I was growing up, prior to the college football playoff and bowl games becoming basically meaningless outside of the playoff, the Outback Bowl was something you strived for to be able to get to a New Year's Day bowl game. And that was a New Year's Day. That's a New Year's Day bowl game, and that's what you wanted to get to, because at the time it wasn't just a free for all to get into the New Year's Six. I mean, it was, you had your BCS bowls and you had your New Year's Day bowls that were not BCS bowls. And those were highly attainable, or those were like goal worthy bowl games to try to get yourself into. I mean, I remember some great matchups in the Outback Bowl and then the Capital One Bowl. Those were the two that are played in Florida New Year's Day that match up Big Ten versus SEC, and Outback Bowl one year, Purdue and Georgia. I mean, it was a game that went into like triple overtime, I think it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kyle Orton, and it was a game that Purdue should have won, but a botched a weird no good field goal call that if there was replay would have been overturned as an actual field goal was the end of that game. So, I mean, the Outback Bowl is no slouch whatsoever. Typically, now, I can see why people are up in arms a little bit this year, because typically the Outback Bowl sees maybe the third best SEC team play in it. Obviously, the Outback Bowl has lost some of its esteem because of the designation of New Year's Six. I hate that. That's silly. But in typical years, you would not see a 4-5 Ole Miss playing in the Outback Bowl. Ole Miss wouldn't have made a bowl game regardless with that record. So, I can understand why they're upset, because I feel like they got gypped more so in their opponent than not making a New Year's Six bowl game.
Yeah, and that could be true.
And the best way for them to describe that feeling is we got gypped by not making a New Year's Six bowl game. We just because you look at New Year's Six and it's a higher level opponent, and I mean that's true. It is. I think it's more so they're just upset that they have to play a 4-5 Ole Miss. So if they go out there, win this game, it's got an asterisk on it, in essence. Congratulations, you won a bowl game, but you beat a team that should had no business of being in a bowl game. And I can see that's where the frustration I feel like could be coming from. But at the same time, IU football fans, you need to sit down and shut up because your football team was actually relevant this year, and you didn't have to. I mean, we all know you IU football fans are so used to your actual football program, Notre Dame, being ranked up there in the top that you feel like your Indiana Hoosiers were gypped because you're so used to what you get from Notre Dame.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree, and that's what I have down on here is the fact that I have. Don't let disrespect ruin what was a great season for IU, arguably the best season they've had in years. The fact that they finally and like also like yes, they're playing against a 4-5 SEC team, but at the end of the day, I mean, when you really look at it, I know I was hyping up IU at the beginning of the year, and I still feel like they're a good team, and I still, I mean, heck, I was, almost correct on that pick of them beating Ohio State. They came kind of close to pulling that comeback out. But, the Big Ten was down this year. Wisconsin wasn't Wisconsin. Michigan wasn't Michigan, or at least they weren't, they were worse than they usually typically are. The teams that they beat along the line and into these long streaks against were teams that were not very good at the end of the day. The Big Ten was not what it normally is. Even Ohio State, Ohio State's looked good and playoff caliber at times, but there's been other times where first half against Nebraska, the end of the game against IU, first half against Northwestern. And I'm not saying they have to play perfect halves every time out, but at the same time, there's been times where they've looked beatable. So the Big Ten as a conference has looked down this year. So, I mean, IU had a great season in a year the Big Ten was down and is ranked higher than they've been ranked since I've thought, thinking back to some of the players
I've never seen them move up past 22.
Right. They've been ranked. I mean, I'm sure like maybe in the Antoine Randall L days they might have been ranked.
Maybe. I don't even think they got as high as they got. I don't think they ever cracked the top 10 or even the top 15
right.
with Antoine Randall.
Well, not that high, but I mean like the last time I remember them even being like ranked.
They've been ranked here recently.
Maybe in like the Terry Hepner days, maybe?
Yeah, I believe so. I think maybe even under Kevin Wilson they were once as well. But they got up to like 22 or 23 was the highest, and then they got beat and got knocked back out. They spent like a week there.
And don't they have a lot of talent coming back next season too? So like in a full season,
we'll see.
That's true. Yeah,
everybody is up in the air because of this whole transfer rule thing. I mean, they've already. Let's be honest. A lot of these IU players that are draft eligible, I have a feeling are going to jump.
Maybe.
Jump while you can. I mean, Whop Phillier, is his stock going to get any higher by coming back next year?
Probably not.
Now, they lost, recruiting-wise, one of the best recruits they've gotten in program history last year, wide receiver. He put his name in the transfer portal already, so there's some depth for wide receiver gone. Now, they do have a great situation coming back at quarterback. You still have Michael Penix. You got, I think it's Jack Tuttle.
Yeah.
Tuttle. And then you're also bringing in true freshman Donovan McCauley from Indianapolis. So
yeah.
from my old high school, Lawrence North.
There you go.
That's going to be that's pretty big right there. You're going to have strong leadership and talent at a very key position. no matter what conference you play in.
But bottom line, I mean, I've heard it all through, the years of working on the IU broadcast, and by broadcast I mean I worked in an affiliate and pressed the button every hour. It's still it's something,
yeah,
right?
Do what you gotta do.
But no,
you could have not. You could have chosen not to press the button, and there would be no broadcast.
True. Dude,
So
the amount of
you were the broadcast. You had the broadcast at the tip of your finger.
quick aside from that, real quick. So for those of you who don't know, all I did was work at the ESPN radio and affiliate in Indy that has the IU games. So I had to press the station ID every hour. There were times where they didn't break for the ID. I would pod them down and press the ID because they would not take the ID break at the top of the hour. I was so aggravating as someone that's like, what do? Do I pod down the school that's paying the station however much to hold their games, or whatever, however that works, or what? So it was very stressful. It was a very stressful job at times.
You made the right decision.
But no, what I was getting to though is the fact that like every year, you hear, like I've had to hear at least on the IU broadcast about how they're disrespected. They're the Big Ten is against them because every time they play against Michigan and Wisconsin and Penn State, there's always calls that don't go their way, that should go their way, and that the Big Ten is just out to get them. They finally have a good season, and now they want to ruin it by being like, well, it wasn't as good as it could have been. Like, it went exactly how it should have gone, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but there's a chance even if the Big Ten doesn't change the rules for Ohio State, there's not a guarantee that IU would even have been able to play in the Big Ten championship game or have been able to do really much of anything. Like
no, they wouldn't have been able to, because guess what? The week of the Big Ten championship game, they were supposed to play Purdue.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah,
they both called that off because they had too many COVID issues at both schools.
So IU, be thankful of a good season, and
guess what? Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin, those schools aren't going to stay down for long.
Nope, that is very true. Last Indiana school we're going to talk about here tonight is for the time, until we get on to our hot and cold segments here in a bit. But Notre Dame is headed to the college football playoff. They will face Alabama in the Rose Bowl. They did lose 34-10 in the ACC title game to Clemson. And this is just same story, different year. Notre Dame gets into a big game, kind of like what we talked about with Ball State a little bit, like the fact that like it's just kind of same old story, or had been same old story, is they get into a big game and they lose. I mean, I'm surprised that they lost the way that they lost, because we had hyped up Notre Dame. We were like, what? Notre Dame, played. They still had to go out and beat Clemson. They still had to go out and do it the first time they played. They did it. Yes, there was a lot of absences, but this Notre Dame team is actually better. They can still hang with Clemson, even if Clemson is at full song. So we'll see what they can do. But now that now that it's happened and they lost by 24 points, I'm like, I really honestly shouldn't have been surprised about that. I mean, they lost to Alabama. They lost to Alabama in the national title game. They've lost to the Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, I think at least once, maybe twice. They lost to Miami.
It was twice, but the other one was like way back in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay.
I think that was back even when Charlie Weiss was the coach.
I think that was Brady Quinn years too.
Yeah, it was. So Brady Quinn's sister was or AJ Hawk.
That's right.
Or his sister was engaged to Brady Quinn, or vice versa. I forget how it was.
But as a ranked team, I think they were ranked in the top. They were ranked pretty highly when they lost to Miami in 2017. They then lose to Clemson in the college football playoff a couple years ago, and the ACC title game versus Clemson. Just any big game that Notre Dame plays in, they lose, which is kind of part of the reason why I'm not only annoyed that they're in the college football playoff, but just kind of annoyed in general that, we put any stock in them whatsoever, because every time they get into a big opportunity, they fall short.
Yeah, it's true. And, I mean, if you're a betting person, put money on the money line for Alabama. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be one of those deals that Notre Dame's always going to be Notre Dame. After this year, they're going to go back to being an independent, load up their schedule with a bunch of cupcakes. They're going to play Wake Forest and, UConn and Boston College and Syracuse and all these schools. And oh, look, but we played USC, Stanford, so we're okay. And they'll always consistently be right there in the conversation for the college football playoff without having done really anything. Now, this year, they did actually do something by, temporarily joining the ACC, beating Clemson once, and then
they're never joining a conference again. By the way, like even
no.
they're
after they got
like,
embarrassed in the conference, now had they won, had they won the ACC, it may have been considered. But getting embarrassed like they did in the ACC championship game, they're like, no way do we want to have to do this again.
Well, and why would they care? Because I mean, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, conference championships don't matter. So why would you put yourself in position to basically play a play-in game every year for the college football playoff when you could just go undefeated?
How do they not matter? The only team to not get in was a one-loss Notre Dame team who lost in a conference championship.
What do you mean? How do the conference championships not matter?
To the playoff committee.
They don't.
Alabama won their conference championship.
Okay.
Clemson won their conference championship. Ohio State won their conference championship.
In general, they do not matter. Ohio State's made it in as a non-conference championship winner over a Penn State team that beat them in the regular season. There have been, I mean, like we're going to talk about here in a little bit, or I can just go ahead and talk about it now, I guess. Had USC won, they would have the same record as Ohio State and be an undefeated Power 5 conference champion, and they were ranked 15th. I don't think a win over Oregon puts them anywhere close to the top 6, or maybe even a New Year's Six bowl. I mean, maybe because Oregon got a New Year's Six bowl, but I mean, conference championships do not matter. Had Northwestern beat Ohio State, Northwestern's not in the college football playoff. They don't care about any team in the Big Ten besides Ohio State. Iowa State, had they won against Oklahoma, we would have had a discussion about whether or not Notre Dame, who lost their conference championship game, should be in over Iowa State, who won. So
I think that would have been a conversation that they would have seriously looked at, though.
Right, but I'm saying Notre Dame probably wins that argument.
Won that game, that would have been a much better win than.
But Iowa State has 2 losses, and yes, they would have 2 wins over Oklahoma, but that at the time they were what? They were 6. So, I mean, the fact that would even be a discussion, let Notre Dame in, who gets embarrassed by 24 in the ACC championship game, who opens at 17-point underdogs to Alabama, there would have been discussion on whether or not to let a Power 5, a school that were from a conference we're calling a power conference, whether or not they should actually be in as a winner of a Power 5 conference over Notre Dame, who lost their conference championship.
I will be honest. I will say, had Iowa State won, I think the argument for there would have been a much better argument for keeping Notre Dame out and putting Iowa State in. But because Iowa State lost, there's no way you're looking at putting a Texas A&M team in at 4 for them to have a rematch against Alabama that they've already lost once.
Well, right.
But I think if Iowa State had won, I think it would have been a lot bigger of an argument.
But the fact that we can't definitively say that Notre Dame still would be out is bonkers to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like last year, Virginia played Clemson and they played them it was like they came out strong. They ended up getting obliterated. But had Virginia won, Virginia wouldn't have been in the college football playoff. They beat a team that played for a national championship and won a national championship the year before. They wouldn't have been considered. So conference championships do not matter in college football and essentially college sports in general, because you can. I mean, if you're
basically if you are preseason top 4 and you hold rank,
yeah,
you're good.
Yeah, you can. I mean,
but in order to hold rank, you also do have to win your games, and for some of these schools, that's easier said than done with the conference that you're in. So
yeah, see, because the whole idea,
to me, is a big reason why Cincinnati is nowhere near the conversation.
See,
we'll get into that.
you, yeah, it's
We'll
like you and I
later.
disagree on that, but like that's what I'm saying because I know in the beginning the conversation was, ooh, see, it's 4 because there's 5 power conferences. That means one conference champion will not get in, and now it just doesn't even
We
matter.
already know who that conference champion
Yeah, the Pac-12, you're out, but you're out.
Pac-12, as somebody said, I think it was Joel Klatt said it today or yesterday. The Pac-12 is essentially in football become irrelevant.
Yeah, it has.
And it's not because they played their games after 10 o'clock because they didn't do that this year. It's just that they're, I don't know, the brand of football they put out there is just not at the same level. Even from the eye test, it's not at the same level as every other Power 5 conference.
One last thing I do want to say about Notre Dame is I don't see, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future of Brian Kelly is. Obviously, he's not going to get they're not going to be rid of him anytime soon. But they're kind of in the same boat as Michigan in my eyes, as far as like they're too prideful of a program to go with to not go with a big name, a flashy hire, flashy this, flashy that. Because they're afraid of a few rough seasons to get back to relevance. Like I think there's coaches out there that could.
This is a team that's consistently preseason top 5.
No, listen to the entire argument. What I'm saying is that Notre Dame right now, when they have to play a good team, is not a good team. They always seem to flounder. There's a couple of exceptions to that rule. But whenever they have to go up against the cream of the crop teams that they should be able to compete against to be in the conversation every year, they don't add up. And I'm saying is I'm sure there is a coach or two out there that isn't a flashy hire that could, Notre Dame would be bad for maybe a year or two, and maybe not even that. And then they could actually go out and recruit. Because remember, Clemson wasn't a great school before Dabo Swinney. No one had ever heard of, or at least I hadn't, nobody had ever heard of Dabo Swinney before he took the job at Clemson. And yet now he has turned Clemson into a powerhouse. And you know why? Because Clemson has a history, but it's not a storied history like Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is like, you want us to take the next Dabo Swinney may be out there, but he's not Lincoln Riley. So I'm just throwing out a name. He's not Luke Fickell. He's not Luke Fickell, so we don't want him. We would rather have the flashy hire. We would rather, Jim Harbaugh leave Michigan for Notre Dame. That's not going to happen. I'm just saying. We'd rather have the big name flashy hire because we're Notre Dame. Like the big name should want to come here, but because they don't want to do that, they don't want to go out and get the unproven guy that has proven it at smaller schools and can maybe build it up to be a competitor in these games.
Like the Jim Tressel. Think about it.
Right.
Jim Tressel came from Youngstown State.
Exactly. Like that's what I'm saying.
Brought Ohio State back to big time relevance after Jim Young.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. Would Notre Dame do that? I mean, they went out and got Brian Kelly, who was the big flashy hire from Cincinnati. They went and got Charlie Weiss because he was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. Now, obviously, one has done really well, one did not do very well, and
Charlie Weiss started off really well because Tyrone Willingham left the cupboard very, very full.
Oh yes,
very full.
Yes,
and it was hard to lose with Tyrone Willingham's recruits. Love or hate Tyrone Willingham, I think Tyrone. I love him. Tyrone Willingham was a good coach for Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. He just wasn't winning enough games for Notre Dame.
Well,
if you think about it, Notre Dame truly hasn't been in your terms of relevant since Lou Holtz.
But that's what I'm like. What I'm saying is they think they're that relevant, and they're not. But is what I'm saying.
On paper, they are. Okay. On paper, you are relevant if you are a year in, year out, top 5 team, bringing in some of the best recruits in the nation year in, year out, and I would much, you bring Michigan into the argument, kind of that you're comparing those situations. I would much rather be in Notre Dame's situation than in Michigan's situation. Notre Dame has a system in place. Notre Dame's system is winning them football games. Notre Dame's system is getting them into the college football playoff. Is it making them competitive in the college football playoff? No, but it's getting them into the college football playoff. And then you look at Michigan. Michigan has no system. Michigan has no success. It's, I don't know. I feel like I would much rather be a Notre Dame situation than Michigan's.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was only saying that.
When you look at college football as a whole, there's only two programs that are truly relevant. Two.
Yeah.
Alabama and Clemson. And everybody else is just playing catch up.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, LSU last year, I feel like LSU backed into a great year with, I don't know, I just feel like everything kind of fell right for them with Joe Burrow just having this magical season that he had. Their deep, I mean, because you look how hard they fell this year. I know they had a lot of COVID issues and opt-outs and everything like that, and they lost a lot to the draft, but those consistent, relevant programs are able to maintain that. Notre Dame's able to maintain that. Yeah, they kind of got away from what their system was there a while back, and they went 6-6 one year, I think it was. But they got back to their style, their system, and it's paid off again. But it's at the same time, if you're wanting to go out and try to hire a unknown commodity, it's really tough these days when a coordinator, if he has one bad season, gets canned.
Yeah.
Or a head coach is going down the drain, and that last ditch effort that coach has to right the ship is the athletic director basically says, we're going to clear your staff and I'm bringing in the guys I want to bring in, and we'll see if we can get this thing righted. And that happens a lot of times. I mean, look, it happened at Purdue. Well, not really, because one of the guys that got kept was a really good guy. Really, I guess right now, if you were wanting to hire an unproven commodity, the one name that's out there that everybody should be trying to grab as their next head coach who has no head coaching experience, Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati. After Darrell Hazel was let go, Freeman was kept on. One of the coaches, he probably should have been, if Brom didn't bring in Nick Holt, they should have kept Marcus Freeman, but Marcus Freeman ended up getting picked up by Luke Fickell. Now Cincinnati set themselves up very nicely because if Fickell ever jumps to a bigger program, Marcus Freeman is in line essentially to take over that as the head coach at Cincinnati, and I believe do big things there. So, but if you look at coordinators that are unproven, that if you're looking for that next small guy, I mean, the route that Clemson took to get Dabo, that's difficult. Even Jim Tressel was a proven commodity at Youngstown State, winning national titles at that level. So it's tough just to go out there and find that next Dabo.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know they don't grow.
Like you said, trying to be, become relevant. Like I said, there's only two programs that are relevant in college football right now.
And that's what I'm saying though, is that I know as far as relevance, as far as being ranked every year, whatever, being in the conversation, yes, Notre Dame is relevant, but they're nowhere near capable right now of contending for a national championship.
But anybody outside of Alabama and Clemson.
I mean, you could make the argument, Ohio State was pretty close last year to beating Clemson.
Ohio State could be pretty close this year, depending on which Ohio State team decides
and depending on which Clemson team shows up too.
Right.
So,
but even out of just those three, who else is ready to contend amongst?
And I'm glad that you bring up that point, because we're going to get to it here in Hot and Cold, which let's transition over there right after these ads, because we're 40 minutes in. We should probably get to the ads. So let's go ahead.
Identification.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and get some words from Anchor. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place. We also want to remind you that you can follow us on Twitter, Crash Course FM. Like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel. A new video coming out at the end of this week. It's our best of 2020s. That's a YouTube exclusive this year, so you won't miss that. Crash Course Podcast. If you are on the listening side, the audio side, make sure you go follow the Twitch, where we record live every week. 3C Media, twitch.tv/3C Media, and then, of course, listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course Podcast. So we're going to get into hot or cold. Basically, that's a segment where I say a statement, and B. Scott and I decide if that is a hot take or a cold take. So starting off with question number 1, Ball State will win their first ever bowl game versus San Jose State. For me, that's a cold take. And you know what? I'm doing it the same way that I did Buffalo. I will be, pleasantly surprised. Maybe my maybe I finally realized how to harness the crash kiss of death, and I can just start, picking against the teams I want to see win. But San Jose State is a very good team. They're 7-0. They've beaten every team on their schedule this week or this year by 2 possessions, and that includes Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State was another ranked team, so San Jose State is no slouch this season. They're going to be a tough opponent for Ball State, even tougher, I think, than Buffalo was. So it'll be a fun game, an interesting game, but I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to look at it the same way I did the Buffalo game. I'm hopeful that Ball State gets their first win. Obviously, as a Muncie native, Ball State alum, I'm hoping that Ball State finally pulls it out. But I do think San Jose State's just a little bit better. I mean, they had to win 5 straight games to even go to the MAC championship game, so. And the Arizona Bowl, not even a little bit better of a bowl. True. Absolutely. Oh yeah, definitely still a banner year. We won't be like IU fans. We will accept our good season, and the bowl game is icing on the cake for that season. Speaking of, true, very true. IU, and question number 2, IU was robbed of a New Year's Six Bowl. For me, that is a cold take. Kind of what we were talking about earlier, and you mentioned it earlier, the fact that, they couldn't play Purdue either time. They were supposed to play them twice. And they couldn't play either time due to COVID. So anybody out there that's like, oh, they changed the rules for Ohio State. Yes, I understand that's not the greatest look for the Big Ten, but the Big Ten is botched 2020. Let's just go ahead, as a conference, from a play standpoint, from an administrative standpoint, the Big Ten has been a hot mess this year. From saying they weren't going to play until the spring because they wanted to kind of look good and progressive, and then yeah. Right. Right.
They're not eligible for Big Ten championship unless some of the conference can't meet that threshold. Then by that point, it will be the 5 games of Iowa. It was
Yeah.
like, what are you talking about?
Bottom line, they botched the entire season. And so, yes, it's kind of stinks from that standpoint, but who knows if y'all would have been able to play Northwestern anyway, even if they hadn't changed the rules. It might have then gone back to Ohio State if you guys had been picked. So who knows? So, it does, like I said, at least speculation, the COVID cancellations, or whether they could have even played in the Big Ten championship game. Their big wins over Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan, they all had a combined 9-12 record. Wisconsin needed to beat Minnesota on the last weekend of the season to even get to 500. And there is a case there. I'm not saying there's not a case at all for a New Year's Six Bowl for IU. You can make a case for the Orange Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl. But Fiesta Bowl, you're not going to make a case over Iowa State or Oregon because they're both conference champions. And oh yeah, so you can't make. But I mean, Iowa State at least played in their conference championship. I think is what I meant by writing that down. And then you can kind of make a case for the Orange Bowl, but I mean Texas A&M. I mean they're not better than them. And I don't think they're better than UNC either. So I think the teams that they picked, the playoff committee picked for the New Year's Six Bowls are correct in my opinion. You can make the case for those two bowls, but even then, I don't think IU fits in there as far as being a better team. So I don't think they got gypped out of a New Year's Six bowl. Yes, you could make the case that oh, they changed the rules on us, but you had your own COVID issues. So again, I'll reiterate my point from earlier. Enjoy the best season that you've had in years, and let's see if you can do it next year in what should at least be a somewhat normal year.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely a case. They were not robbed. Who did they beat? Other than names,
Right.
record-wise, who did they beat? Michigan was bad this year. Penn State finally won a couple games at the end of the season. Wisconsin, Wisconsin was who we thought they were going to be. Obviously, we all thought after that thrashing they gave to Illinois at the opening week for the Big Ten that, oh hey, Wisconsin's legit. But then we realized, wait a second, Wisconsin lost a lot. They don't have a run game. They don't have a defense. All they have is a quarterback that has nobody to throw to, nobody to throw to. So yeah, I think Wisconsin's probably the best team that they beat all season. Okay, congratulations, you went into Ohio State. You hung with Ohio State. But guess what? A lot of people didn't get up to play against Ohio State.
I mean, that's not what you said when I was arguing for it, but that's neither here nor.
Get up for it. I just said you were all from the upset because it was going to be a home crowd. I said everybody's going to be up for it because guess what? Ohio State takes everybody's best shot
True.
because they're Ohio State. This is what happens. Now I'm not taking anything away. IU is a clutch improved team, but are you New Year's Six caliber when you can't beat anybody with a winning record?
Yeah.
So you're playing. You're okay. All right. You really want New Year's Six? We can swap you out. Swap you and North Carolina out. You go up against Texas A&M, who was, you're the argument to make the college football playoff. Let's see how well you hang against them.
Right.
Good luck. At least you're paired up with somebody that is at least the same caliber as you, potentially. Now, I'm afraid they're going to go in there and just screw this up completely because they're so upset that they got left out of the New Year's Six Bowl. I know they're going to say, oh, but we got a chip on our shoulder, we got some food, this, that, and the other. Well, prove it. Stop talking about it. Go out there and hold this. And just win the game. Go out there and beat the snot out of them. So there's no asterisk next to it. You go out there and you beat them by 3 points. Guess what? There's going to be an asterisk next to that saying, congratulations, you beat a team that was 4-5 on the season in a bowl game. That's a team that should have been in a bowl game. And, I have a feeling that they're going to, Ole Miss is going to go, we're being truly disrespected. This is the
Yeah. I'm looking at the Big Ten East. Exactly. It'll be fine. It's gonna be a rough day. Um. Yeah. Looking at the Big Ten, there were only let's see, there were only four teams that finished above 500. Northwestern and Iowa in the West, who IU did not play, and then IU and Ohio State. So the only team that finished with a winning record that IU played this season, and I don't know, I know that it's technically not a losing record and thus a winning record, but it'd be 500. But I don't really, I've never been a fan of that. Yeah. So yeah, so the team with the best record that they beat was Wisconsin at 3-3, who needed a win over a 3-4 Minnesota team and a team that got thrashed by a 2-4 Michigan team at the beginning of the season. They needed a win over them to even end up at 500. So at the end of the day, IU was good in a year the Big Ten was down, and they should be appreciative of that, be excited about that, and see what they can do next year. Right. Yeah. 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 And so, I mean, they win that game. They maybe they're subbed in for Iowa State, who lost, so maybe you put them in against Oregon. But congratulations, you beat another team that like plays in a bad conference, and well, I mean, Oregon did win the Pac-12 at least, but I mean, still, who knows? So like you would have beat an Oregon team that's not the Oregon of old, basically, even though they are the Pac-12 champions. So I mean, I'm not saying that like just because they probably they might have lost either of those two games, they don't deserve to be upset. Okay, fine, be a little bit mad, but don't let this year be taken away because of that. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Notre Dame, that's the next question. Notre Dame shouldn't have made the college football playoff, hot or cold. For me, it's a hot take, and I will tell you why, B. Scott. And that's I think the whole point of the podcast. I'm pretty sure. So, the reason why, okay, you look at their resume. Yes, they beat number 1 Clemson. They did beat number 19 UNC, and I'm pretty sure they beat them pretty handily too. Not like as far as score wise, but it was a good win. It wasn't they lucked into like a 3-point win, at the buzzer or anything. But and I will give the playoff committee this before I really rip them in the next question. I will give the college football playoff committee this caveat. Defining big wins and ranking teams this year is like defining a catch in the NFL. It was very hard to do because this team, nobody's played the same amount of games. And, this team has a big win here. Doesn't mean as much as this team getting a big win here. It was a tough year to rank teams. But still, the committee backed themselves into a corner because at number 5, so Notre Dame loses. Next team you could have theoretically put in, number 5, Texas A&M. Well, they lost by, I think, 20, 30 points to Alabama when they played earlier this season. So that doesn't look very good. The next opponent that you could potentially have put in is Iowa State. They lose the Big 12 championship game. So those two teams are out. Number 7, Florida. They lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. So you're not doing that. You have number 8, Georgia, who also got beat by Alabama in their meeting earlier this season. So you're not picking Georgia. But you would either have to let in an 8-0 Cincy team or a 2-loss Oklahoma team. So you're not putting in Oklahoma. The next best choice is Cincinnati. And before you scoff at Cincinnati, here's the Bearcats' resume here. They have beaten, because the discussion every time is, oh, well, they play in a weak conference, whatever, blah, 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 blah. The fact of the matter is, they beat every team in their conference by at least 2 touchdowns. So they won by at least 14 every time out. So it's not like they were barely winning games, they were preseason ranked, or got a big win early in the season and just barely hung on. They were dominating teams. The only team that is an exception to that rule of losing to Cincinnati by less than 14 points is Tulsa, who is also ranked. Tulsa also played very well this season. UCF at one point, was, considered to be a top 25 team. They played a good season this year. So the American Conference is not a bad conference. They're kind of like what the Mountain West used to be with Boise State and TCU and all of them. So, in a sense, like Cincinnati beats every team on their schedule by multiple touchdowns, as you would expect a team from, if you're propping a team up and putting them in the top 10 from, a non-Power 5 conference, you would expect them to beat everyone in their conference by multiple scores. And then the team they did beat in the conference championship game was another ranked team, and they still beat them by 3. So you have an 8-0 conference champion, and are we really saying that Cincinnati is going to put on a greater or less performance than Notre Dame? I mean, would Cincinnati have opened at more or less than 17-point underdogs? If we're already conceding that the team that plays Alabama is going to lose by 3 scores, why not let Cincinnati in? Why not let that? If Cincinnati goes out there and gets wrecked 62-10 by Alabama, then at least the College Football Playoff Committee can say, well, we tried. Look, we selected a team from the American Conference. They played like crap. It's going to be a couple years before we try that again. Like, they could have easily said that. But by the way, we have proof of teams from even that conference going into their bowl game and beating SEC teams, UCF over Auburn. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Cincinnati could have beat Alabama. No way saying that. They would have lost. But are we really saying, and I know why that Notre Dame's more appealing because of the fan base and the lore and whatever, but exactly. So that's what's frustrating about it, because I think Cincinnati would have been a good choice. And at the end of the day, we're talking about a team that's going to be blown out by Alabama anyway. So why not just go ahead and give an 8-0 conference champion a shot? I'm not, and
one of those that, yeah, okay, I'll say this about Cincinnati. They deserve more respect from the committee, and there's a fact. That's a team that kept winning every week, and every week they kept falling in the rankings. So I will say that much. Are they 100% deserving of being in the playoff? That's so tough because this year it's just a tough year in general. I kind of feel like the committee was just like, let's just get through it. Let's put the four teams in there and do what we can, and let's not think too much about it for now.
don't take pity on the committee. They really try to get Oklahoma there. Did you see them at number 6? They're like, Oklahoma, we're still thinking about you guys. I know that typically you're in, but I want you to know we're still thinking about you.
You guys were not even in the top 25. So we got you, homie. We got
Yeah,
you.
we've been looking out.
Yeah, I don't know. The committee, I don't know what to be honest, they did not show any respect to Cincinnati whatsoever with the continuously dropping them week after week and then bumping Oklahoma that far that quickly. I don't know. At one point in the season, Oklahoma was dead to rights. And to be honest, had Oklahoma State not just decided to give up on the season, Oklahoma would have been in the free afterthought.
Yeah.
You know, it was the only reason why they got back in the conversation was because Oklahoma State just said, "Eh, Chuba Hubbard's done. We're done. No reason to play these games anymore. We'll just kind of phone it in the rest of the year." That's what happened with a lot of teams. They just decided after a certain point, it's just not worth it. Let's just phone it in. And I feel like that's what the committee did too. Eh,
Yeah.
we'll watch it regardless. The only two teams that really matter are Alabama and Clemson. They got in, so we're good.
Yeah, but even then, that still doesn't excuse like then why not try it Cincinnati out? Like that's my thing is that
I
like
feel like this was the year they just decided like it's not worth trying. It's just not worth it.
why not? Are we saying that like no Notre Dame is more like because of like and I get the whole money thing. We'll get into all that in a minute, but like
To be honest, I think the status quo and Cincinnati being disrespected like they were is almost a good thing for the future. Hear me out. It's a good thing because now you're going to get more people, and Ohio State did it again with, Dabo thought they were not even a top 25 team. That's silly, to
yeah,
be honest. That was just him saying, I don't know, like what was going on there. Like, really?
yeah,
Really? Yeah, I'm gonna rank them as far back as I can just so they don't try not to get them in. You know what that sounds like, Dabo? That sounds like you trying to avoid Ohio State playing it anywhere. But
why? Yeah, why is a head coach going into a game against your like the opponent you're going to play in the playoff, giving you bulletin board? Yeah, why? Oh man.
but I feel like there's enough up uproar about the rankings this year that may actually give traction to expanding the playoff. Had Cincinnati gotten in and been respected the way everybody said they should have been, I think keep status quo top four. All right, look, somebody got their shot. That's all you guys wanted was somebody to get a shot, and you got it. But now it's there's a lot of people upset about this, a lot of talk, a lot of pushback on the committee. So now I think you may actually start to see a little bit of traction in expanding the playoff, whether that's 6 teams, whether that's 8 teams. I don't think it's ever going to go beyond 8, because then you start opening up a whole other can of worms when you get to 16. Whoa, buddy, are there really 16 teams deserving of playing for a national championship? I mean, look, Coastal Carolina, yeah, they were great all season, and then they got to their bowl game, and they got beat by unranked Liberty. You really want to see a team like that playing the
Liberty's been ranked all year. I thought Liberty's been ranked.
Liberty has been ranked, so don't. But everybody's like, oh, Coastal Carolina. We're just waiting. Thought
Right.
ranked this year, and so I think BYU beat them.
No, they beat BYU.
Oh, they beat BYU.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, Coastal Carolina was undefeated.
I feel like this snub of Cincinnati will actually help moving forward with a possible expansion of the playoffs.
And we'll see. And I hope you're right on that, but I just don't. I don't.
It's gonna happen. Eventually, they're gonna realize. Wait a second, we just made more money.
Yeah, I sent that out as a tweet too. I was like, how is like the NCAA, like in my lifetime, the NCAA tournament has gone from 65 to 68, and I probably went to 65 like during my lifetime. I just don't remember because it was probably pretty early. But they went from 64 to 65 to 68. Major League Baseball now wants to put like half the teams in. Half the teams already make it in the NBA and the NHL, and then you also have and the reason why is money. So like, how is college football like? Well, I think it's good having the same 5 teams be in contention every year with no.
The same 5 teams are the breadwinners for college football.
Right.
You really believe throwing a Cincinnati in there is
But here's the thing. There's.
a ton of advertising dollars.
But here.
The ratings shoot through the roof. Who's going to tune in for Alabama thumping Cincinnati?
So okay. So let's go at it from this standpoint then.
People that never stepped foot on Notre Dame's campus, or even came close to attending Notre Dame, are huge, diehard Notre Dame fans. They're going to tune into that game, and they are everywhere. Because guess what? They are Notre Dame football fans. They are IU basketball fans. They are New York State. They are people that are going to tune into that game. Those are the people that they're making money off of.
So then don't even worry about a play. Just every year have those be the top 4 teams, and no matter what happens, win or loss, have them be in. If that's
Basketball figured it out with that beginning of the season champion invitation of champions, where you have Michigan State, Duke, Kansas, and Kentucky play each other, kind of like a round robin every year.
yeah.
They figured that out.
Yeah.
Now, let's be honest, those aren't good nowadays for, there's more parity in college basketball than there is
Oh
in
yeah.
college football. But I think all of that could also ultimately be changed now as well with this new transfer rule. Because guess what? You got out of high school, the recruiting out of high school is going to start taking really a big step back with this transfer rule. And like right now, the top players flock to those 4 teams. Well, guess what? Then they get stuck there because every top player is at those 4 teams. Well, guess what? Not everybody gets playing time. Sorry, not everybody can be a starter. So you're going to start seeing now those back end of the depth type guys transfer out to other schools where they know they're going to step right in and start immediately, be the best player on that team. So you may start to see some more parity in college football because of this transfer rule. But at the same time, you may also see the greater 6 or the greater whatever the non-power 5 conferences really take a huge hit because the best players for Cincinnati now may be like, well, I'm going to go into the transfer portal and try to get in at Clemson or Ohio State now that I've proven myself.
Right.
There's so many unknowns right now for the future of college football because of this transfer rule, and then also with the future of this potential NIL, the name, image, likeness stuff that's happening. Then it's going to become the big names are going to want to go to the big programs because the big programs can get their name out there the most.
Yep.
So there's just so much uncertainty going forward in the college football world that I don't know if it's ever going to change outside of these top 4 or 5 schools, or maybe we're going to see an explosion of parity happen. I don't know. Just kind of hope that college football playoff committee decides, maybe it is time to expand to try to soften the blow, or help expand the parity in this game.
Yeah. And, that's a perfect segue to the final question, and that is the college football playoff needs fixing. And that, for me, is a hot take. And you see the title of the stream, the title of the YouTube video, talking about, the BCS and all that stuff. You look at the last 5 seasons of the BCS. Florida State, in 2014, it was Florida State, Auburn, Alabama, Michigan State. In 2013, it was Notre Dame, Alabama, Florida, Oregon. In 2012, it was LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma State, Stanford. Now, I understand Stanford had Andrew Luck during this time, and Oregon had, like, Marcus Mariota and all them. 2011, it was Auburn, Oregon, TCU, Stanford. In 2010, Alabama, Texas, Cincinnati, TCU. These are all teams, most of those teams, yes, Alabama is a constant, Notre Dame is a constant, but there's several of these teams that have not even set foot in a college football playoff. And these were teams that were good at the tail end of the BCS at the introduction of the college football playoff. Now, obviously, Florida State, Oregon have all made appearances. Auburn has not made an appearance. We have not seen Florida make an appearance. TCU had a shot. Oklahoma State has not really had a shot. Some of these schools, Stanford, not really at all. Of course, they've kind of fallen apart ever since, Chris Hogan and Andrew Luck, that kind of 1-2 punch at quarterback there. But even then, the last 5 seasons of the college football playoff, LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma last year. 2018, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. 2017, Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama. 2016, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Washington. 2015, Clemson, Alabama, Michigan State, Oklahoma. So obviously you hear a lot of the same names in the college football playoff. And I understand it's because, Clemson and Alabama are the only two teams that maybe are, well, not maybe, they are at the pinnacle of college football right now, and everybody else, like you said earlier, B. Scott, are just trying to catch up. But let's keep in mind, this will be the 4th or 5th time in the college football playoff that Alabama has played Clemson. If those two teams make it, it's already going to be the 3rd time in the college football playoff that Clemson's played Ohio State. These are the same matchups we see every year, and you'll want to know why. It's kind of what you were talking about in the last question, B. Scott. It's because these big prospects, if nothing else matters to them other than getting exposure and getting drafted in the NFL, I mean, why wouldn't you go to Ohio State? Why wouldn't you go to Clemson? Why wouldn't you go to Alabama? Because those are the teams making the playoffs every year. The only parity you might see is in the SEC. That's the only time you see maybe different schools ranked in the top 10. I mean, heck, when's the last time you've seen Texas A&M ranked this highly, except for when they had Johnny Manziel? So, it works for teams in the SEC because it doesn't matter who you are in the SEC. The SEC has had maybe the most as far as different schools making the college football playoff because they're the SEC. The college football playoff committee would have you think that any team that plays outside of the SEC, any player that plays outside of Oklahoma, any team that plays outside of Clemson, any team that plays outside of Columbus, Ohio, or South Bend is inferior. That's what they would have you think, because guess what? When they need to prop up Ohio State's win over Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, they will do that to make Ohio State look good. But when you make the argument for 8 teams, guess what? Number 8 Wisconsin we laugh at that. We scoff at that. You want to see Wisconsin up against Alabama? Why would you want to see that? They're the 8th best team in the country. There's 130 college football teams. You don't want to see the 8th best take on the 1st best? What do you mean? And so, you see the same teams every year. And like I said, if you want exposure as a player, why wouldn't you go to one of those higher schools? Because those are going to be the teams in the playoffs. I mean, I was thinking about it earlier today. If I am a top high school prospect on the West Coast, why would I go play for the Pac-12? Because even if I'm at a good school on the Pac-12, I'm playing at 10 p.m. Eastern time. I'm not going to get exposure, and even if I do, it's just not going to work out. Because heck, this year, if someone wanted to go to USC, had they won the Pac-12 championship game, they would have been barely in the top 10 or just outside the top 10 as a Power 5 conference champion. What are we even doing anymore? And even, like I said, conference champions mean nothing because you've seen teams that have been, unranked or not unranked, non-conference champion teams that have made it in, conference champions that have been left out. And so it's just because there's no reason. Like you said, it's all about money. So why not take the biggest money, biggest breadwinners and put them in the same, put them in the college football playoff every year. So that's the thing, because I guarantee you, if you expand it to 8 teams, if they start picking other teams to go in there, you're going to see the parity and the talent get spread out a little bit more. But that's the thing, because if you want to go if you're in ACC country, you go to Clemson, because if you go to North Carolina, well, even if you beat Clemson in the ACC championship game, you're not going to the college football playoff. Clemson is, because they're Clemson and they are number 2 and got beat by number 10. So why wouldn't they go? And so it's just all convoluted. And the reason why I brought up the BCS is because the BCS did what, like, we were mad at the BCS because it coveted the regular season too much and kind of devalued the postseason because only 2 teams made it. It wasn't a definitive championship. Now the college football playoff has gone and devalued, the regular season, but valued the postseason. We're like, hey, we're giving you a definitive champion. It doesn't matter what happens before, but we give you, the top 4 teams battle it out. Well, yeah, but now it's gotten to a point where it's the same teams every year. We see the same matchups every year. Heck, I mean, I told our old college buddy B Pope that I was like, hey, I want Ohio State to win, only because it'd be something different. Like, even if it's just Ohio State, Alabama, it'd be something different. We haven't seen that since the semifinals in the first year with Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah, that was a fantastic game. And guess what? Some of the best games and some of the most parity was at the beginning of the college football playoff, where there wasn't this thought process of anything outside of these 5 schools is inferior football. I mean, you look at the appearances. I mean, Clemson and Alabama both have 6. Ohio State, Oklahoma have 4. Notre Dame has 2. No other teams have multiple appearances. I mean, you can't tell me that there's not, other money programs in the Big Ten besides Ohio State. I mean, if Penn State wins, if Michigan State wins, Michigan wins. I mean, one year when they beat Iowa, they were forced to go in because they beat Iowa. But that's the thing, like, we haven't seen those 2 teams really at the pinnacle of their talent since. I mean, Michigan State had Kirk Cousins and rattled off a couple of Big Ten championship appearances, and now that it doesn't matter because they're not Ohio State, they've fallen into the pits a little bit. So, I mean, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, BCS appearances in 4 of the last 5 seasons, Alabama made 4 or 5. Pac-12 was in the top 4, because I was looking at the top 4 of the last 5 seasons of BCS. Alabama would have made 4 of the 5 playoffs. Pac-12 was in the top 4 3 of the last 5 seasons. TCU made 2 appearances as the Mountain West. Cincinnati made an appearance as the Big East, which has turned in kind of the ACC or the AAC now. You had 13 different teams in 5 seasons as opposed to 11 different teams in 7 seasons for the college football playoff. So, I mean, there needs to be more teams, and that talent needs to be spread out so we can actually get like a perfect system. And I know that there's not a perfect system that exists, but it's just so disheartening and so backbreaking to see the same 4 teams make it every year essentially. And it's turned into basically, I hesitate to throw around the word corrupt or anything like that. I mean, that's a little strong, but it's easy to tell that this is a biased way of how they're choosing the teams every year. Like, I don't know what needs to happen. It starts at the top. Like, there needs to be, let's have all commissioners from all 10 conferences be the college football playoff committee. And at least you'd have some sort of, cohesion there, or something like where there's not just, I don't even know who's on the committee anymore, to be honest. But, yeah, it was coaches. It was like Condoleezza Rice, Oliver Luck. Yeah. And who knows? I mean, it could be like everything else where we see, because, I mean, it's kind of like that with, it's like that with all professional sports now, too, where the commissioner is, at least in some way, shape, or form, at the mercy of the owners. So who knows what kind of things, I mean, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but, like, who knows, like, what those guys' interests are that are the athletic directors and things that are on that committee. Who knows if they're like, okay, well, obviously it's more profitable. All we care about is profit, and these are the 4 or 5 most profitable teams, so that's what we care about. And we don't care about naming a champion, whatever, all that stuff. We just care about getting more eyeballs on the screen. Because, are you really telling me that a half of football from Notre Dame getting obliterated, like the views that are going to watch the first half and by halftime it's going to be over, are they really, is it going to be really that much crazier than if it would have been Cincinnati? Like, I don't think so. Obviously there would have been a little bit more, there's more of a fan base there, but I think you have more casual fans if you hear about like a Cinderella story. And that's a point that I heard someone else throw out too. Like, there's no Cinderella stories in college football. Because even if you go undefeated, TCU. Yeah, exactly. You had Boise State beating Oklahoma. You had TCU got to play Wisconsin the Andy Dalton, J.J. Watt year. Yeah. I can't remember who their quarterback is. No, Utah beat Alabama. Cincinnati with Brian Kelly played Tim Tebow in Florida and got the crap beat out of them. I can't remember who their quarterback was, but that was like in like one of the last years of the Big East. No, it wasn't Gunnar Keel, but it was somebody else. I can't remember. But yeah, like heck, the BCS gave more smaller schools a shot than the college football playoff has even thought about. And I understand. Oh, Craig, there were 5 BCS bowls and there's only 2 playoff games. Exactly, that's my point. It's like there were more opportunities. And here it is. So I do. I mentioned it earlier. An hour and a half ago that I had I think a system that is more than 8 teams that I think will be pretty good. No, listen. It'll be. It's not 16. No. No. Although I have been doing that in my spare time, and I am almost through the first round. Now it doesn't do very well for my argument, but Cincinnati, number 2 Cincinnati, like a 2 ranked Cincinnati is beaten by number 7 Auburn in the first round. So that's a little sneak peek at that. I'm going to tweet about it later once the first round is done. First of all, the 32 it won't happen. I don't know if we want to see it happen, but the 32 team playoff, like the structure of what I have like in store for it, it would never like happen. But the first round played at home fields. So look, guess what? All you ADs out there, you want more money, more revenue. Play to be in the top 16 so you can host a playoff game. And then you want to talk about there are 3 bowls out of 40 bowls in a given season. There are 3 bowls that mean anything. So you want to know how you make those bowls mean something? Make them part of the college football playoff in the second round. And then all of these are broken down into 4 playoff regions: Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl. Then you have obviously those games that play out, and then you have one neutral site for the college football, like Final Four. It would be an awesome system. I love it. It would never happen because that's way too many teams for football. But here is my thought process. Because 16 teams would be the dream. 8 would be perfect because competitive balance is lacking. And that's ultimately what I want to see. But here's my thought process. And I thought about it today, so it may not be super fully fleshed out, but just hear me out on this one. So you take the top 10, and here's what you do. The first weekend of the college football playoff, it's the week after the conference championship games. So technically, you give the the top 6 teams a bye. So 7 plays 10, 8 plays 9 as kind of a playing game. You can put them at both sides if you want, but also make it into a make it into an actual like neutral site place. But they could also be home sites as well, whichever suits your fancy, B Scott. Yeah, play them at Dayton. Yeah, exactly. Then so you play those 2 games. Then you're down to the final 8. So you re-rank everybody. So based on that, so for instance, if you are Cincinnati, let's say you're ranked 10th, and you win your first game, and so now you could theoretically be ranked 7th instead of 8th. So you could theoretically set yourself up for what statistically may be a better matchup in the second round. But that won't matter because then what you do is in the second round, you keep the BCS bowl games and you keep the like traditional matchups. So Big Ten, Pac-12, The SEC champion usually goes to the Sugar Bowl. ACC champion usually goes to the Orange Bowl. Big 12 to the Fiesta Bowl. And then you fill the bracket out that way because the bracket actually doesn't exist. I know I'm kind of like getting off the rails here, but the bracket. Well, okay, so here's what it is: 7 through 10 play round 1, right? Okay, so then the entire everybody's re-ranked. Then you play the BCS games. So Ohio State plays. No. Ohio State plays Oregon. You have this year you'd probably have Oklahoma play Ohio State or Oklahoma play Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, and then you have Clemson and Alabama play the 2 remaining teams. So then you get your top 4 from those BCS games, and then you play it out that way. It's a little bit of a longer process, but I think you have more action-packed games. By the way, with 10 teams, 5 conference champions, 5 at-larges. So you can make your choices based on that. But at least at that point, because guess what? Through those, 4 rounds of playoffs plus conference championship weekend, that's 6 straight, essentially playoff weekends. Like 5 or 6 essential playoff weekends. Because right now, because guess what? Even this year, the conference championships didn't matter. It only mattered to Ohio State. If Northwestern wins, they're not in. If Oklahoma wins, they're not in. If it didn't matter who won the Pac-12. They're not in. So you're telling me there's really only 2, had Ohio State lost, what would they have done? What would the playoff committee have done? They would have, right, but that's what I'm saying. They would have been 2 SEC schools, and your first round matchup would be Alabama versus Texas A&M, which we've seen before, and was a absolute drubbing at the hands of Alabama. Oklahoma. Yeah. Exactly. So that's my solution. I think a top 10 would be good, but at the bare minimum, it needs to be 8. 5 conference champions, and then you have a reservation for a undefeated at large. That you can possibly put in. Yes. Yeah. Why not? Why? But here's the thing, that doesn't fix anything. Because guess what? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It fixes nothing, because then they'll just be like, let's pack all the SEC schools in there and call it a day. Because that's basically what they did. If there were 8 teams this year, you would have gotten Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M, and I think... No, you would... Well, you have... I'm sure there was another SEC school right on the cusp of being in the... there would have been at least half of the college football playoff would have been from the SEC this year without any kind of relegation on conference champions. Right, but also, I'm just... And that, by the way, that doesn't mean that 1 through 5 are the conference champions. You could have Oregon be number 8 and play Alabama in the first round. Because I just want conference champions to mean something, man. I do. I'm tired of going in knowing, last year when Oregon beat Utah, even with, his name's escaping me for quarterback now for the Chargers, but yeah, Justin Herbert. Even with, a better Oregon team than this year, there was no chance they were going to make it in. Now, granted, it was a full season. They lost 2 games. But, Utah was playing for the Pac-12's right to get in. And even then, there were people that didn't want to see Utah in. Because we have this idea in college football that anything that isn't the SEC or isn't the other 4 schools we've talked about is inferior football. And that's what I want to change about college football is because that's what will happen even with 8 teams, is that you'll see the first year out of the gate with 8 teams, you'll see Alabama drub the 8th best team, and you'll see all the pundits go, see, we told you, you didn't deserve to have 8 teams in there, because they won't let time for competitive balance to actually set in. Maybe, but at least... I mean, I mean maybe, but at least I mean, we already saw what they did this year with eight. I mean, so basically, what would happen is you'd have the five conference champions. So yeah, maybe Oregon beats out of Cincinnati this year, but I think the competitive balance will change, and you will see more teams like that. Because remember, the year that Utah, for instance, the year that Utah beat Alabama, Utah finished that season ranked third. So like you will have, and I think the year that Boise State beat Oklahoma, I think they were like into the season in the top like eight. I think that year or whatever. You saw when TCU, TCU. Okay, so well, perfect. Like, but like there was a year in the BCS where Boise State played TCU. Like two a WAC school and a Mountain West school got a chance to play on a big stage in the BCS. That would not have been allowed to fly back in or that would not be allowed to fly in today's college football playoff. So, that's all I'm saying is that like yes, you could have a situation where that happens, but at least with five conference championships mean something. You have a story where hey, had Virginia knocked off Clemson last year, Virginia's in. Then what do you do with Clemson? Clemson then now becomes a bubble team and could potentially knock out somebody who went into conference championship weekend hoping that the status quo would stay the same. Like you have excitement there with that, at least. Like I know, and that's the thing too. There's not going to be, at least with the way it is right now, and even back in the days of the BCS, you're never going to get every season there being a smaller school getting an opportunity. It's not going to happen every year, but at least with 8 teams, 10 teams, 6 teams, whatever, it opens the door for that. It makes the competitive balance greater because you now have kids that are like, hey, I don't only have to go to 5 schools if I want to be put on a platform of any kind. Yeah, for 7 teams, you'd have to have 3 teams have a bye and then play basically 4 versus 7 and 5 versus 6. Not necessarily. Because here's the thing. So back in the day, you didn't want to see a longer playoff or anything like that because of player safety, and you can still go that route of player safety. But obviously, if player safety meant anything, well, true. But I was like, if player safety meant anything, this year wouldn't have happened. But but we don't care about academics when we have a week of college basketball tournaments and then the NCAA tournament for 3 weeks. Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I mean, also, by the way, keep in mind that if you have the five conference champions make it, then that will force the committee to rank because they know their rankings after six don't matter. So that's why you see IU make the gigantic jump they've made this year. You see you've seen a lot of jumps. Like the jumps that they had teams make. Like I was looking at it, like Texas A&M after they beat Florida went to number, and this was they had already lost to Alabama by this point. They were ranked 8. They got up to 5 by beating middling SEC teams. Like they beat South Carolina and Arkansas and all of them. Same with I think Georgia. Like Georgia, like they had a big win over Auburn at the beginning of the year, but like they finished the year beating middling SEC teams, but they like climbed up. Florida is the only team that's not Alabama that I think like actually can be. I mean, Texas A&M is good, but we don't really know how good because their wins are against because the SEC also wasn't at their cream of the crop this year as far as talent goes. But like at least like you wouldn't see Oregon, okay, because Oregon at number what are they like 24, 23? Like that's a pity ranking. That's like when they made UConn 22 one year because they were undefeated Big East champions or whatever they were when they played Oklahoma and got thrashed. You wouldn't see those pity rankings because that's what the committee does all season is that's why earlier on in the year Georgia and Alabama were 2 versus 3. Well, that's the reason why is because guess what, 2 versus 3 is a playoff game, so they know they'll get the big that's why you see if Penn State plays Ohio State and Penn State is 6 the week before 2 weeks before the game, that's why they bump up Penn State with a win up to 4 so you can say number 1 versus number 4 playoff teams. So like you would see Oregon or whoever you'd see USC going into the Pac-12 championship game would have been ranked maybe 12th, 10th, something like that if there were 8 teams, if there were 6 teams, because you don't want to be made a fool of by having this Pac-12. Now, granted, you'd also open up the door to have what you had this year with an Oregon team that wasn't very good making the playoff. But, I mean, look, how often have we seen, like, the New York Giants? I know this is professional football, but how often have you seen, like, the New York Giants? This year you're going to have a team from the NFC East that is under 500 that makes the playoffs. And, like, exactly, and do you hear anybody screaming at the top of their lungs, UConn didn't deserve it because they weren't the top 4 team all year? Exactly. So, like, story that was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know who's got what. I I just know that it happened on the field of play and in esports. Oh man. Well, before we are you have you said your piece? Okay, we should probably wrap it up here. But before we do that, we're going. Yeah, I know. Didn't I before we went live? I was like, "Hey, B Scott, you're not feeling the greatest. I'm going to try to keep it short." And then here we are on almost 2 hours. Quickly, we'll go through our college football playoff predictions. For me, first round, Rose Bowl, I have Alabama over Notre Dame, easy. I don't think this is a close game at all. Alabama rules. Sugar Bowl, as much as I want to see Ohio State win, I think Clemson is the better team. By the way, I don't buy into any of the, they only played 6 games, they don't deserve to be there. I mean, Ohio State came into the season ranked, ranked, I was like, so even at a full season, especially with the Big Ten being down, I think Ohio State still, you put them on the field for 7. Yeah. No, not at all. I don't know. But anyway, I don't think it would have mattered. Yeah. Yeah. And then you have in the Sugar Bowl, so the Sugar Bowl, Clemson over Ohio State. So that makes another rematch of Clemson and Alabama. And I'm just going off of pure hatred for Alabama. I actually don't mind Clemson. I like, you know what? It's very simple for me. I like Trevor Lawrence. I like the Clemson. I like the color scheme they've got. Yeah, that is true. I may not like him too much if he's in the Jaguars teal next year, but oh yeah. Yeah, they did. I have Clemson over Alabama in the national championship game. Clemson raises the banner. I think that's going to be the third time that they've beaten Alabama in the national championship game because they won with Deshaun Watson. They won a couple years ago with Trevor Lawrence, and now they get a chance to do it again. Yeah. Yeah. You heard it here first. Notre Dame, Ohio State in the national championship game. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just ridiculous. It's all ridiculous. But yeah, so B. Scott's got Ohio State winning it all. I have Clemson. Remember, you can. Oh yeah, Notre Dame, 100%. Lock it in. You're vote all of your life savings on Notre Dame. Make sure you do that.
Happens, folks. Buy stock in ponchos and wear them. Watch any post game stuff because everybody's going to put their Lou Holtz on, and it's going to be like watching Bad Yuck.
Oh my god.
Right through your
Remember, you can follow us at Crash Course FM on Twitter, like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Follow us on, or subscribe to us on YouTube. The end of the year podcast is coming out. It's going to be YouTube exclusive, so make sure you're locked into that. Also, make sure if you are on the audio side of things, make sure that you go follow us on Twitch, 3C Media. Remember, you can listen live every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can catch the Crash Course Podcast. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
We will be back next week because it'll be time to talk about the NFL playoffs. But until then, have a good week, everybody.